Hi, I'm Michael McIntosh,
Hey, I'm Nicole McIntosh.
and we wanted to start doing brief video series just to encourage other Christians out there that have struggled with different things. We found that in our walk and in our testimony as we grew closer in our relationship and then became husband and wife ultimately, we felt the common thing that we were hearing from a lot of Christians was nobody was walking with one another in order to strengthen the kingdom. People that we talked to felt like, oh, I'm alone in the sin that I'm in, or nobody understands me. I'm the first one that has gone through this. And God is clear in His Word that there's nothing new under the sun. Things are just new to us because it's our first time going through it. And so our heart behind this was really to be able to let people know that there are others out there like you. Your struggle is not, even if it is unique to you, it's not unique. God has seen it before and He can see you through it. And so prayerfully, we just want to be an encouragement to the people around us and to the community at large so that people will know that there are people that are walking just like you. Hopefully we get to a point where we get to answer questions and have those tough conversations to be an encouragement to those who are really going through things.
Yeah, so wanted to start out like Michael was saying, and really, this is going to be our very first video. So really, we want to share our testimonies and just our backgrounds and what we came out of, what the Lord has rescued us out of, and then also our story together and how we met each other and what has gotten us to this point. And so, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
All right, I'll take the lead.
Okay.
So prior to meeting Nicole, I grew up in the state of Texas. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. Played football in high school and was a pretty big time recruit. Had a few considerations from colleges, and so my identity was football growing up. I knew that, I grew up in church. I knew who God was. I knew what the Bible said. Was knowledgeable, but didn't really have that walk with the Lord at that time. And so I identified as a football player. I loved the game. Was fortunate to be able to play in college and play a little bit beyond. And so at that time, I was really, I guess I would say, walking in the typical high school kid that thinks they're hot stuff type of mindset. And so I wasn't on fire for the Lord. I participated in different things to put on a facade of Christianity, but I wasn't living out total Christian life. And so upon graduating high school and being able to attend college, playing football down there, and after having a good game, I remember going to parties, and like my first time as a freshman starting, I get to the party and those girls there were like, "Oh, you're number 80." And I was like, "Yeah, that is me." And and so that was like, I guess also a little bit of background about that. So I wasn't attractive growing up. So nobody ever, I was not the guy that people were, it's not a lie at all. I wasn't the guy that ladies were coming up to because they were interested in him physically. And so that was all new to me, to grow into my body finally and fill out my frame, and then to be a starting athlete, even though I started in high school, to be a starting athlete at the college level, and then to kind of, you see movies and things like that. And so to kind of get a taste of that life, I definitely was intrigued by it. And even with having roots in the church and things like that, I will say that it was a struggle. There were more people telling me how to make the most of being an athlete and being a pretty good one than there were people telling me, how to walk with the Lord. And so even my friends that would go to church with me after a football game, we played games on Saturdays and Sundays, we get up and go to church. Even those guys that I was surrounded by would still, we all partied together, we all hung out together, we drank together. And so it was just a little bit different. And so my struggle wasn't that, it wasn't out there for everyone to see, because sexual sin, as we know, at least for heterosexuals, if nobody actually sees you, catches you in the act, then nobody knows. You can keep it under wraps as best you can, just like keeping your mouth closed. And discretion, I have 3 older sisters, so that discretion was important to me, because I was like, well, how would I feel if someone painted my sisters in that light? So I wouldn't talk about my sexual exploits, but I had a ton of them, I just, wanted to, I guess, pay back all the ladies that were not attracted to me growing up. And so I, so to speak, as we would say, I did my thing in college. And so, moving out of college and then moving to Arkansas, after school, because I knew I wanted a family ultimately, and I knew that I wanted land and different things to be able to raise vegetables and have animals and be able to eat healthy and live a different type of lifestyle. I moved here, but I found myself in unfamiliar land, but in a very familiar situation. That comfort that I went back to was women. And so just exploring, sexuality and thinking that, I can serve the Lord on Sundays, so to speak, but then justify my Monday through Saturday about what I did on Sunday. And it's like, God isn't concerned about the acts that we perform. He's not a God of things that you do for salvation. And so even knowing that, when you're walking in that, you want to do everything you can to justify the wrong that you're doing. Like, did I know it was wrong? Absolutely. But I also was like, well, I want to keep doing this. Our nature is to sin, is to mess up. And so
that's what's comfortable.
Yeah. And so going back to that place of comfort was what I always fell to. And so to then go and think about, okay, what is it that God actually wants of me? Instead of saying, okay, well, God, I'll work with kids and I'll minister to them. And even to the point of having my own little justifications and parameters for how far I was willing to go in sin. Like, one of my big things was I would never sleep with a married woman. So married women would make passes at me, but I was like, no, because that's a covenant between a man, woman, and God. So, I already have to answer for one sin. That's my sexual sin, but I don't want to have to answer for why I entered into a sexual sin with someone. And all sin is sin. Like, God doesn't rank it higher or lower. It's just, that's how my human brain works, because his thoughts are not our thoughts, and his ways are our ways and not his ways. And so that was one of my big ones. And then I wouldn't mix business with pleasure. So since I am a coach and was trying to become a coach at the time when I first moved here, moms, older sisters of kids that I coached or trained were also off limits as well, because I was trying to justify. But that didn't count for the other women that I was, having sexual encounters with. And so it took me going through and getting to a lot in order for me to be able to then really decide I'm going to live for the Lord and not just try to justify what I'm doing or try to sin a little bit less. I mean, it was difficult. Like, I'll admit that. Like, one thing that I turned to after the physical sexual interactions with other women was like, okay, I can just do pornography because this is just my sin. I'm not leading anybody else to sin. That's just my own struggle. And then that it spiraled into a different type of problem that you never would even think about, because when you pervert your mind in that way, then you start, like, unconsciously, you're not even thinking about it, but you start undressing people in your mind, like, because you're used to that. You're used to being able to fast forward through a video, a woman walks up dressed, and then in no time she's undressed, or she's scantily dressed, and then in no time she's undressed in these these videos that I'm watching. And so to be able to see women, peers, being a teacher, working in a professional setting, and then seeing ladies and like having to retool my mind to not see someone nude was a struggle. And it's like, it's not a struggle that you even want, that you're even aware that you're building by watching these videos, but it almost came a thing where I was almost dependent on it. It was like, no, I felt like I need to get off. I need to be able to just finish and pleasure myself, and the whole time not being mindful of what what God had called me to do, but also not knowing how God would be able to bless me being able to come through that, actually be delivered from it, and be able to use it as a testimony. Because there are so many people that I hear, and especially me working with high school boys and hearing the conversations that they have in the locker room and even in the hallways, because kids are getting a lot more bold these days, and being able to actually minister to them and witness to them, because it is something that I've gone through. It's like, hey, you're not the first one that's gone through that. It's not a struggle that you have to go through, and then be able to tell them what happens on the other side of it when you want to actually come out of it, because there does come a point as a man of God where you do want to live in a way that honors what God wants, but also to where I'm not perverting my wife, her friends, the people that she brings into my life. I don't want to see people and undress them in my mind. I don't want them to be naked in front of me. I know I hear people say that's the worst bit of advice from a former porn addict. The worst bit of advice I've ever heard about public speaking was if you get nervous, just picture everybody naked. No, I don't want to picture everybody in the room naked. It's the last thing that I would want to do. And so it does definitely help me be able to minister now, to have been able to deliver from that. But at the time, absolutely wouldn't have been able to talk to anybody because I was still going through it myself.
Yeah. So what was it? I mean, and then I'll share my testimony. But what was that deliverance part like? When you finally decided to walk in step with the Lord instead of gratifying the things of your flesh.
Honestly, deliverance, it was scary because I knew what it would mean. I knew what it would mean, giving up. I knew what it would mean as far as like going through a tough time of like, I'm so used to either having sex or ejaculating whenever I want. And then to go and live by God's design when I've lived so much of my adult life doing whatever I wanted to do. It was different to be able to do that. And it was scary because I know I'm looking down this barrel of, at this time when I made the decision, you and I my wife and I hadn't even met. And so it was like, I didn't know where the next finish, so to speak, was coming from. It was not like, oh, I see it's means to an end, I'm married and now I need to be delivered, or I got caught and now I need to, fix this. It was just a personal choice. And so to not know when the next time would be, it was scary because A, I was so used to, like I said, doing what I wanted to do, and then B, like just not knowing what that road would be like, and not feeling like I had anybody to talk to tell me, because it's like, okay, everybody that I know, at least to my knowledge, hadn't gone through this, and if they had, they weren't open and sharing, they weren't honest about it, and so it was scary. It was difficult because you have to fight the urge, especially in the day and age that we live in. People just being half dressed around you. You go to the store and people are just exposing themselves, especially we live in a warm climate down here in the South. So in the summertime, people just, I guess, trying to beat the heat. Right. And it's like, you see that flesh walking in front of you. There's no avoiding it. And so just like different difficulties, and it's like everything is a trigger when you're trying to quit something. It's like, I guess like almost like a recovering cigarette addict or someone that is an alcoholic. It's like when you're trying to put that down, everything reminds you of that. Right. And so it was the same way, and it was just like everything reminded me of that. And so I had to like make sure I deleted social media. Not very active. My wife, you made a post the other day. If I didn't see her Facebook post in 5 seconds, I had to take her to Texas Roadhouse. And she knew I wasn't going to see it because I pretty much just got very inactive on social media because of the things that are posted on there and the things that are available to you. And it's like, I don't want a gateway back into that lifestyle, because I didn't have to go and watch porn to see either, people being provocative or people exposing themselves. TikTok was full of it. I never downloaded TikTok on my phone. I made sure I didn't and will not download TikTok. Instagram was another that I would not get on because I felt like, this is softcore porn. I saw my friends and the posts they were looking at, and I was like, even, it was intriguing looking at it in college, but I didn't even download it then because I was still, at that time, I was like, that's porn. That's not people trying to keep in touch. Like, and then the whole thing of, you sliding in DMs and all, it's like, no, people need to be able to communicate with one another, not slide in DMs. I didn't even like the term and the association with it. So yeah, it was a struggle. It was different for sure.
And did you ever feel freedom from that, or do you still kind of like struggle with, do you feel like God has completely delivered you? Do you feel like you walked in that deliverance, or do you feel still kind of like just so people who are struggling to see if there's like actually hope when they continuously deny what they want to do? Or
no, I think that for me personally, I can't speak for everyone obviously, but I think for me personally, I do feel like there was deliverance and walking in a freedom, and that freedom is different for everybody. For me, I did not feel pressured. I did not feel pulled but I also knew what my triggers were. And so it's like, I guess to kind of create a parallel, as an athlete, because both of us play sports.
Yeah.
So I knew my limitations. I knew that I was big. I knew that I was tall, at least for a football player, but I wasn't the fastest. So I knew that, my thing was to get my body in position to pin it against my opponent, because they weren't going to be long enough to get around me.
Right.
And so I knew what my limitations were, so I just took advantage of my advantages, and then wouldn't let the opposition exploit my weaknesses. And so we have to understand that what we're going through when we're asking God for that deliverance, Satan is our enemy. He is the opposition. And so in walking in that freedom, you have to be aware of what your triggers are. So that was that process of me having never downloaded TikTok, Instagram, things like that, helped because I didn't have a yearning to go get it. But then I had to censor what I would watch on YouTube.
Right.
Or, like I have virtually no friends on Facebook. Like I know after we got married, a lot of your family requested me as friends, and I always would talk to my wife about it. I was like, "Hey, do you know so and so?" She's like, "Yeah, they're friends." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "I don't even know why I asked you if you knew them. I knew I wasn't going to add them."
Right.
And so it's because I don't know what other people post, and so I don't want your post. I know they will pop up on my timeline if I add you, and so just that freedom. So having the freedom to say, to feel like I'm in a position and discipline to not feel like I needed to cave because these are my wife's friends, and I made a decision and made a covenant with the Lord, and so if not adding people on Facebook's not it's not a criteria to get into heaven, and so I don't have to have it, and so it was like that, and then just the deliverance of just like walking down the street, like I'm still a man, I'm still a heterosexual male, so I have healthy urges for my wife now. And I won't even be dishonest. Like you see beauty everywhere, so you see beautiful women, even if they aren't trying to be, trying to expose themselves or trying to be provocative. I mean, beauty is beauty, and handsome is handsome in your case. And so it's like you see it, but you look at them through a different lens, and that's where I say the deliverance came from. I no longer looked at them in a lens of like I want to conquer that, I want to have sex with her. It truly was, she was a pretty lady, and could keep walking, and it didn't bother me. The thought didn't linger in my mind. I didn't have some, where I need to, let me pretend like I'm going down this aisle in the store so I can get one last look at her. And so that's where I would say the deliverance came from. So it just took a different form. It wasn't necessarily that I did not have the urge to have sex anymore, because God gave us the urge, but He gave it to us in a healthy way. Yep. And so what I had to learn to see was not to pervert it.
Right.
And so when the Lord gave me that, I do feel like I truly did have deliverance, even though there are still those different things out there. You just have to know how to navigate it and walk in those different realms and not be tripped up by them.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. So my testimony is a little different. I grew up in a Christian home and knew the Noah's Ark, knew all the Bible stories and everything like that, and we prayed, and it was, but I also knew hypocrisy in the church, and there's a lot of things that were going on in my life as well, and that created trauma, and so I ran away from the Lord. I ran away from everything, and about 12 years old, actually in second grade, I remember just kneeling down and begging God to make me a boy. And so, and I was so mad because I was still a girl, and I'm like as if God's gonna change. Yeah. He doesn't make mistakes. But I feel like if I was a boy, God showed me later on as I walked through healing and deliverance that if I was a boy, things would have looked different. But really, the reality is boys or females or males face abuse, face trauma, face everything. It's not just females. And so it doesn't matter, Satan has no respecters of persons, and he doesn't care if you grew up in the church or not. His mission is to try to kill, steal, and destroy, as it says in the Word, and what we both have experienced in our own lives. But anyway, so 15 years old, I had my first, or 16 years old, I had my first girlfriend. I dated guys growing up, but it was mainly to hide what I had I had girl crushes, but I didn't really have the vocabulary for it. And I didn't know, I remember like I had a best friend that I, longed for something more to happen, but I was like, confused. Why am I feeling this? But then 15 years old or 16 years old, I finally acted out on those urges, and it felt natural. And it was exactly what my flesh wanted. I felt safe with a female. Men to me were looked at a light, like all men were pigs. All men were this. And I had this negative light towards men just because of men constantly either abusing me or neglecting me, or it just, and so I was like, well, you know what? That's it, I'm done. And I got to a point in my life too where it didn't matter, I also had sexual sin. I mean, yes, lesbianism and, LGBTQ, like, not just that, but I also had just period sexual sin and struggles where I struggle with pornography. That was introduced to me in 3rd grade. And not that I acted out on that in 3rd grade, but it left a seed. And that seed finally bore fruit in high school. I really started watching pornography and hid it. I mean, it was something that nobody knows about unless you talk about. And so that's something that it was my hidden sin. But being a lesbian was outward. I was very proud, out and proud, as we would say. And there was at one point in my life, I think it was, probably about 21, where I wrote off all men. I was done with men. And from the time of 16 to 21, I did sleep with men and women, but I was always drunk with guys. I was never sober. And so I was either taken advantage of, or I just didn't care, one night stands or things like that. I didn't have any value for myself because my value was taken from me. And so I thought that men just wanted to use me, that I was just a tool, something that they could use to get off on, and so I didn't have any I didn't know that God created me valuable. And so fast forward, I was a super tomboy, and so I was dating this one girl who really encouraged me to wear guys' clothes, and I was already kind of wearing like my brother's clothes and things like that. So, but that really started opening up a door, because I mean, sin, it's a downward spiral. Mm-hmm. So a door will be opened, and then that will open a door to another door, right, which will open that, and then pretty soon you're so lost you don't know which way is up. And that opened up a door to transgenderism. And I had like this, I felt that I was born in the wrong body, and I had gone to Colorado, and where I could create my own identity, be who I wanted to be. And so I chopped off all my hair. I was wearing guy clothes. I was wearing male prosthetics, literally fake male genitalia. That made me feel like a man, but I mean, at the end of the day, I still had to sit down on the toilet to go pee. I still had a period, so things that I couldn't change unless I had like surgery to do so. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of scary for me. But I was dating this one girl who I ended up having an engagement ring for, who encouraged me. Well, she loved me no matter what, and if I wanted to go, start doing testosterone, she would love me and support me in that way as well. And this is in 16, 17. And I struggled with drugs as well, and just really trying to numb and run away and escape the trauma and pain from my youth, and just heartbreak and things like that. And I was really depressed. I struggled with suicide, depression. I've overdosed a couple of times, but the good Lord had other plans for me, and I praise God for it. And so in 2017, I had, at this point, my girlfriend at the time would call me Nick. And days I would feel more masculine, that's what I would go by. And my mom invited me to a women's retreat, and so I went to this women's retreat feeling totally out of place because I did not feel or dress like a woman, but I went anyways. And that was when God used that time, not through a person. Nobody said anything to me. Nobody could have convinced me couldn't convince me anyway. I was born gay per se, and I was gonna die gay. But the truth is, we're born into sin. So I felt like I was born gay, but God says to be born again, to be born of the Spirit, and He gave me that opportunity in 2017. I had this encounter. I had like heat wrap all around my body. I had chills, and I heard God's voice for the very first time in my entire life. And it's not that he probably was always talking to me. It was the first time my ears were finally open to hear what He had to say. And He told me that He wasn't ashamed of me, that He loved me, and He had more for me. And so I ended that relationship that I was in immediately. 3 days later, she flew home. I knew that I couldn't be with her anymore, and I knew I couldn't love her in the way that she wanted me to love her. And I had to let her go. And so I flew her home. And I struggled. Oh my gosh, I struggled. I was depressed. I told my mom, I said, Mom, I wish God would just take me, because it would, one, be so much easier, and my heart wouldn't hurt so bad. Because I had built this whole life for myself, and then all of a sudden my upside down world got flipped right side up, and I had to relearn who I was. And so I spent 5 years of healing. Like, I hated my body, and so God brought me through this healing journey of loving my body, loving my femininity. And so I literally would stand in front of the mirror completely naked, and I'd apologize to my body before I get in the shower. And it was so hard. I stood in front of the mirror and I was like, I'm sorry, whatever. I named the body part that I hated, and then I was like, you know what, God created you for this purpose. And so I started speaking those things over myself. And then I had to stand in front of the mirror and tell myself that I was beautiful. And that was so hard because I never believed it. People would say it, and I was like, no, don't tell me that. Like, I know that's not true. And so I kept having to speak those things over myself. And then one day I saw the light of Christ inside shining out, and I'm like, wow, I just fell in love with what God created and who God created. And so I just spent 5 years in singlehood, really pursuing the Lord, and I got to this point where I was so content being single. I was like, God, I don't even want to get married. Like, I really don't. I can't imagine sharing what I have with you with anybody else. And then I was like, you know what, God, I do want to get married. I think I do. I want to have a family. And so, that's my testimony, and which led me to January when I met this hunk.
Yeah. Yeah. So you talked about, in your story, when and I like the words that you use, so I'm just asking you to speak more to it.
Yeah.
When you said your upside down world got turned right side up. Mm-hmm. And so just identifying that and having to come to grips with what was that like for you? Because I remember, for me, it was different. You were homosexual and you identified as like, oh, I was born this way. I knew the entire time what I was doing was wrong. It was just like, I kind of would be ashamed of what I was doing. I obviously didn't want anybody to see it. So my right side, my upside down world, my world wasn't upside down. I was just detached from the truth. Your world, you felt like what you were living was true. And then God told you the actual truth when you heard His voice. So what was that like for you?
It felt like the rug got ripped out from underneath me. Like my kingdom that I had built came crumbling down. I don't know if I have the words for the emotions that I felt in that moment. But it was like, and I also want to say, like, there was a physical difference when the Spirit of the Lord hit me, encountered me. There's some, I don't know if I'm able to do it, but there's a before picture and an after picture. In the before picture, my eyes were like almost black, like super dark. And then after, my cousin was praying over me, and because I felt like this inside of me, there was this tug of war almost, that I felt like light and darkness was competing for my soul. That's the best thing that I could say. It felt like my insides were being ripped in half, but not like the physical pain. It's hard to put words to it. But then, and I got angry, and I didn't know where this anger was coming from, but I felt super angry, and like the more tears came down my face, the more angry I got, and I felt this rage kind of come up. And then my cousin recognized what was going on. It was spiritual warfare, and she started praying over me, and she's like, I don't remember everything that she said, but I know she was like warring over me. And then I felt this release, and like something left me. So I definitely felt like there's this demonic presence, but when that thing left me, I felt peace. And I was like, no, this is the right thing. Like, I knew what I had been searching for, and it was filled in that moment by the Lord. Like, I was searching for love, I was searching for acceptance, I was searching for belonging, and I was broken, I was shattered. And when I felt his presence, I heard his voice, I was made complete in that moment. Like, it was like God put that puzzle piece together, and I clung on to him for everything. So it felt right. At the same time, it was like tough to come to grips with, wow, I was wrong this whole time.
Yeah.
My pride kind of rose up in me. It was like, dang it, like I was wrong this whole time. Are you kidding me? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that I understand that, because I mean, just with my own just deliverance and my own sinfulness, when you actually do get that, like even with me knowing I was wrong, to walk in like just feeling that weight lifted off my shoulders, like this doesn't burden me anymore. I don't have that struggle anymore. I have that wholeness and what you're speaking to, and I mean that's just, I guess, the next thing that we can talk about and share. Up to us being married and coming together, we didn't come into our marriage feeling like there was two halves that were making up. We were two whole people.
Yeah.
Like I was a complete person outside of you, and a complete person in Christ.
Yes.
When we met, and you were a complete person outside of me, and a complete woman in Christ when we met as well. So you had two whole people that could truly help one another the way God designed us to help one another, and not searching for a need to be completed by the other person.
Right.
You didn't make me more or less of a man. I didn't make you more or less of a woman. And I think that has been a beautiful part and a beautiful aspect in our relationship. It's just that true two whole people that, can hold one another accountable, can, because we've been told lies by the enemy, and then God has spoken that truth to us. When you speak truth to me, even if it stings, I can receive it because God spoke truth to me, and I know the benefits on the other side if I can weather the storm, because I've had to weather that storm. And so if you've had to weather that storm of, no, my identity has been in this whole time, and that's not how God created me, and then having to walk in the truth, and then seeing the fruits of God's labor when you do walk in the truth, as have I. It's like, I think that this is the way that I should be able to do things, or if I'm not doing this, then it's okay, it's not as big a sin. And then God's like, all sin is sin. And then to have to walk in that and say, okay, God, I'm going to not fall victim to, I'm at least not going to dive head first in it. I'm not perfect, but I'm not going to jump and willingly leap into this pit of sin, in my day-to-day walk. So I think that was an important thing to highlight and bring up as well.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. Well, we'll have to do another video on how we met and our testimony, or do you want to continue it?
Oh no, we can make another video.
Okay.
So they're gonna want time.
Yeah.
For that.
So this was just our testimonies, and if you have any questions for us, feel free to drop it in the comment box. We'd love to hear kind of like and address anything. We're pretty much open books. I know I'm pretty open.
Sure. Yes, she is.
So I have no shame from my past or anything like that, because I'm walking in freedom. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe, because this is what we're going to be doing, what we feel like the Lord has kind of put on at least my heart, and just to minister to anybody out there that has any questions or struggling or anything. Like, you're not alone. We're not perfect people. Like, we have our own struggles.
Yeah, please don't get the idea that we're perfect individuals.
No.
That is not what this is trying to paint. This is
No.
not the picture we're trying to paint.
We're not. We want to provide hope, and also just be there for you as well. So thank you guys all for listening, and we love you, and we'll see you guys later on the flip side.